Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Rosemarie Gardella Gates, and I'm the head student for the current practice period here at Appamata. And part of my role is to offer this introduction to Zen. So I'd like to start with 2 minutes of sitting, so you can mute yourselves, and I will ring a bell, and I will time us for the 2 minutes. So just sit upright, lifting your back, and try and have your feet flat on the earth. Feel the earth beneath your feet. Just time to let go of the concerns of the day. Just focus on the breath. In breath and out breath. Okay. Is Serenity back? You're back, Serenity. Wonderful. Well, welcome again, and thank you so much for coming tonight. So this is the first in a series of three classes, 3 1-hour intro to Zen classes. And let's start with introductions. So just your name, where you are right now geographically, and why you're here tonight. So Serenity, could you start us off?
Sure. I'm Serenity, and I'm currently in Arizona. And I came here so I could see Rosemarie's presentation.
It's a
Thank you.
beautiful name.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Barbara?
Hi, I'm Barbara, and I'm here to see Rosemarie's presentation. What was the other part?
Where are you? Where are you
Oh,
geographically?
I'm in Edgewater, New Jersey.
Okay. And I am Rosemarie Gardella Gates, and I'm a semi-retired psychotherapist living in Fort Lee, New Jersey. And I started practicing with Appamata in May 2020, just a few months after the start of the pandemic. And aside from learning a little about Zen from my root teacher, Flint Sparks, at the Cape Cod Institute, a few summer courses that I'd been taking, I knew next to nothing about Zen. So this practice has literally changed my life. And I credit, and I'm so grateful, to meeting regularly with Flint, spiritual friends, and other entrusted teachers, as well as my Dharma sisters and brothers, as being central to my understanding of the Dharma and of practice. And I'm just so grateful. So this 3-part class is offered by every head student. And I think it's so important because the teachings and the practice are so vast and so deep that even 1 or 2 things that one can glean from an offering like this can be really valuable. So a little bit about what the course is and what it's not. So I've planned an interactive journey for us, covering briefly in our class today the origins of Buddhism, starting with the historical Buddha in the 6th century BCE and his teachings. And then in class 2, we'll cover how Zen Buddhism emerged from those early days as future generations of teachers through the lineage of the Buddha traveled from India, Buddha's birthplace in what's now Nepal, to China, Japan, other Asian countries, and eventually to us in the West. We'll see how the cross-pollination between the culture of a country and these teachings influenced each other to form new streams, each flowing into the same river. So this is the story of the origin of Zen. In class 3, we'll cover the origins of Soto Zen, which is our lineage here at Appamata, and explore Zen practice from the point of view of our lineage's founding teachers, Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, What the series will not be is a detailed history lesson, but more of an overview. And each class will have an interactive section where we'll break into groups. Although we have a small group tonight, we'll probably just stay together, the three of us. We'll see. And we'll use writing, movement, or even art to bring to life the Dharma as you experience it in this present moment. So let's start at the beginning with the historical Buddha. In the 6th century BCE, Siddhartha Gautama was born a prince in northern India, in an area now known as Nepal. Although it's difficult to verify some of the ancient records and the teachings attributed to the Buddha, as the Zen teacher John Dido Laurie told Barbara O'Brien, author of The Circle of the Way, A Concise History of Zen, if research proved, quote, if research proved that the Buddha never existed as a historical person, it wouldn't matter. The teachings, tested and practiced for 25 centuries, speak for themselves. As the story goes, he left the palace walls and was exposed to suffering, sickness, old age, and death, but also a monk. Deeply moved by this experience, which he had been sheltered from experiencing prior to this, he yearned to understand suffering and to discover a path to its relief. And this is the part of the story that I find so deeply inspiring. In his late 20s, married and with a family, he decided to leave a most comfortable and pleasurable life of certainty and security among his family of royal stature, to leave home in order to understand the suffering he saw outside the palace walls, and to find a path to relieving it for all beings. He must have understood that it was necessary for him to, quote, let the bottom of his barrel break and completely fall out, which is a reference to a koan, a Buddhist story, but we'll get to that later, in order to set out on this path of homelessness. With curiosity, courage, and generosity, this young man had. I'm inspired by what motivated this man to make such sacrifices. This was a single-minded focus driven by deep compassion and also faith. He did the opposite of turning away from suffering and instead aimed at understanding it completely. This was not a quick reflection. He spent years seeking a path to the liberation from suffering. Our practice is also, in a way, leaving home and coming home simultaneously. An inhale of presence, the now, and an exhale of letting go, of striving, clinging, craving. As Buddha discovered a wider world once he left the palace, so we too, as we practice more deeply, see more and more, become more and more attuned to the wider reality of life. As the palace walls of our self-centered dreams drop away and bring us home to the vastness of our Buddha nature. So we're going to have a Dharma activity now, and maybe what I will do is put the two of you into a breakout room. So it's going to be for a total of 13 minutes, and you will work on your own. You can stay muted while you do your writing or art, whatever you decide to do. And this is the reflection. Reflect on a time in your life, as the Buddha did, when you had an experience that stopped you in your tracks. So just imagine, he's this prince protected behind the palace walls. All he has seen is pleasure. And he is taken outside by someone in his retinue, I guess, and he sees reality. And it just stops him in his tracks. It really affects him. So think of a time in your life when you had an experience that stopped you in your tracks, that spoke to you in such a deep way that you were motivated to make a change. So take 9 minutes to write, and if one of you will have to time this in the breakout room. about what comes up for you as you relate to this prince who, with deep, deep compassion, was called to drop everything, to let go, and discover that which he cannot see, that which he does not know, on a path that he has not yet discovered. What does Buddha's experience bring up for you? And before we go into the breakout room, I'd ask everyone to close their eyes. So let's just set ourselves up for a relaxation. So close your eyes and prepare yourselves. Breathe deeply, but naturally, no forcing of it. Nice deep breath. And imagine that you are reflecting on this experience so that you can write about it. If there's someone that you trust really, really deeply, you might want to write in a letter to that person and describe to them this experience that you had and the effect that it had on you, and share it with that person. This is a letter of intimacy. And if you use Buddha as the person that you want to write to, you don't have to write a letter. It could just be a reflection. But if you want to write a letter to Buddha, if you feel that intimacy, it would be a letter of intimacy with Buddha or your Buddha nature, the best of you. However framing it feels best to you. So we're having 9 minutes of writing, 1 minute to take turns sharing with the other person what it was like, and then a minute of the other person giving you feedback, what it was like to listen to your experience, and then you would switch and the other person would share. I think I'm going to take back the breakout room so that we can all be together during the exercise, and I will keep the time. So let's just getting our 9 minutes set up. I'll ring the bell and we will start. I'll get something to write with myself. Okay. And let's all mute. Okay, so let's unmute, and would anyone like to go first and just share what their experience was in writing?
No.
Serenity? Did you say yes? No?
Barbara, I said no. I'm not ready to go first.
And Serenity? I can go. So I wrote a letter. What's that? Serenity? Okay, so I'll go first. So I did write a letter to Buddha. Dear Buddha, I would like to express my deep gratitude for nature. As a child, I lived a short subway ride from Central Park. My brother and I would take the subway there and explore the hills and stone caves. At that time, it was not so much the beauty of the landscape as the sense of adventure and wonder that the park provided. Decades later, I was amazed at the walls of stone as I drove through, for the first time, through the western US, and these were mountains right on the side of the road. Nature is awe-inspiring and a place that will calm my busy mind immediately. What a gift to be alive and to be part of it all. No separation, beauty all around. Even though the power of nature can destroy, that too brings out the compassion in all of us and our interconnectedness. Thank you for helping me to cultivate gratitude. Would either of you like to respond to what it was like listening to my letter?
I will. I always like listening to what you bring to us. And the power of nature is something that, I chose to live the way I live so I could be out in nature more. And it's very, very grounding in some respects, and very what's the opposite of grounding? Not infectious. It's something like infatuating, maybe. I don't know. But not in a way that it's inspiring, I guess I should say, to be out in nature as well as grounding for me.
Mhm.
Thank you. Barbara, would you like to reflect on my reflection?
I got really focused on the fact that I don't know how to do this right, and I got into all kinds of negative messages for myself. And so it was very helpful for me to hear you because I had a better understanding of what the assignment was. I didn't sort of get it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm grateful that you went first.
Okay.
And I got a positive experience out of that.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your honesty. Um, so, Serenity, would you like to share?
Sure, and I think you've probably heard part of this story from me before. Maybe not, though. I don't know who was in the room when I have shared it, but it's something that I have shared with the Sangha. Um, so, Barbara, we haven't met, I don't think, online, so you probably don't know. I'm a nomad who lives in my vehicle. So I
Oh,
live in a
okay.
van and I'm currently in Quartzsite.
Okay.
And
Where's
2 years
that?
ago, Arizona,
Okay.
and 2 years ago, I met someone here in Quartzsite with a group of solos who all travels singly. Um, and his name is Lloyd. And Lloyd and I spent the better part of 2 days talking about one thing or another. And he included in his information that he had been a practitioner of Zen Buddhism for a number of years. And that made me recall a time when I too had um, looked into Zen. I was, as a young child, I was very, grew up Catholic, and I was very disenchanted with that. I'm sorry if you hear my dog in the back.
No, I don't. It's fine.
Um, um, through talking with him in those 2 days, I felt a connection with him that I hadn't felt with another human being my whole life.
Oh,
And
wow.
probably, I had been searching for different spiritual paths for a number of years, and I had been meditating with another group for 20 years. And I had looked at Zen Buddhism way back when I was very young, before I was 18. And I don't think a lot of it made a whole lot of sense to me, or made um, that much impact, so to speak. And when I got a motorcycle, of course, I read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, but
Right.
because that was one of the future things. But after being with Lloyd and actually seeing him and seeing someone who inspired me, um, I have taken up the study again and the practice. And I know he and I only connected for, a few hours each day for 2 days or so. And then I saw him when I went on my trip to Nova Scotia.
Mhm.
And, at that point, he's now an ordained practitioner. And, he's one of the few people I can say really lives the life and, not just going through the practice and doing things. I mean, he really makes a huge difference, and he certainly made a difference in my life. And I'm glad we still connect periodically here
Mhm.
and there. And I look at him as one of my teachers. Um, though I don't know that, that's not an acknowledged necessarily relationship on
It sounds like a wonderful
his
relationship.
part, but still we're, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So this experience stopped you in your tracks, it sounds like to me.
Pretty much. And, periodically through my life, there have been those moments where it's like within 24 hours, it's like, oh, yeah, me too. So I'm known for leaping that direction.
I think when you can feel the chemistry in a relationship very, very well and very early. I mean, sometimes you're wrong, but if there's a connection, then it it just is, and you feel something is right.
Thank you, Barbara and Serenity. So Serenity, I had not heard some of those details, and it just sounds like such a blessing that your paths crossed, and it just sounds like I that you was very seen by him, and yeah, it's a beautiful story of impact that a connection can have, and I appreciate it very much. Barbara, was there anything that you wanted to say about what you wrote or what you tried to write, or
Um,
you don't have to, you can
I just
pass.
okay. I think that it. I was like totally on the wrong track in terms of I kept thinking about traumas rather than um something an emotional gift given to me or that I've experienced. I just couldn't get past some negative thinking. So um I felt like I wanted to explore that and get away from that at the same time. So I didn't know what to write.
Okay, well, no, I appreciate that. I know this is new to you, so
Right.
thank you for, jumping in and trying. So I think we'll go back to you guys can mute, and we'll go back to our story.
Can I add one thing?
Of course.
As I was leaving Lloyd, and we had hung out with this group of people for like 2 weeks, and then that gathering was over, and I was able to gather my wits about me, do a little bow, um, and tell him to know he was loved, and put my hand on his cheek, and that's unheard of for me. I'm, yeah,
Wow.
and so
Yes.
definitely special.
That it touched that part of you.
Yeah,
You got access to it. Wow. Well,
yeah,
thank you for adding that. That's really special.
it is.
Yes. And that sounds like for me that would be a memory that I would want to go back to, especially if I'm feeling dysregulated or upset. Just that memory would be so soothing to me, I think. I'm just imagining. So thank you for sharing that. So, um, so Buddha's search did not happen in a vacuum. At that time of Buddha's leaving home in India, spiritual traditions did exist, and he first joined a group of ascetics who believed that denying the flesh and inflicting self harm was the path to nirvana. and he gathered disciples around him, and he was quite gifted in this method. But he found that it did not satisfy his quest for the cause of suffering and the means to its relief. Almost dying from lack of nourishment, it's said that a woman walking to a temple with a bowl of sweet rice was moved by his condition and offered him the rice on the spot. After realizing his mistake, that asceticism was not the way to awaken, it is said that he had a childhood memory of a time when, in solitude, he experienced deep, complete serenity. And it was this memory that, in Analayo's words, quote, led the Bodhisattva to come to the definite conclusion that this was the path to awakening, unquote. Here is the memory taken straight from the Mahasakaka Sutta. I remember, quote, the Buddha now, I remember that accompanying my father at his work, and while being seated in the shade of a rose apple tree, I dwelled secluded from sensuality and secluded from evil and unwholesome states, with joy and happiness born of seclusion. This may be the path, the way adequate for knowledge, adequate for vision, and adequate for supreme and right awakening. This recollection and others helped him change perspective. For one thing, he came to the realization that happiness can support progress to awakening, that some forms of pleasure are obstructive while others are not. The takeaway, contrary to asceticism, was that unwholesome types of happiness that wholesome types of happiness need not be shunned. This realization helped him progress to awakening. Another version of the story, as told by Tara Brach, goes like this. It was the annual celebration of the spring plowing, and his nurses had left him resting under a rose apple tree at the edge of the fields. Sitting in the cool shade of the tree, the child watched the men at work. Sweating pouring down their faces, he saw the oxen straining to pull the plow. In the cut grasses and the freshly overturned soil, he could see insects dying, their eggs scattered. Sorrow arose in Siddhartha for the suffering that all living beings experience. And in this case, it was the workers as well as the insects. In the tenderness of this compassion, Siddhartha felt deeply opened. Looking up, he was struck by how brilliantly blue the sky was. Birds were dipping and soaring freely and gracefully. The air was thick with the sweet fragrance of apple blossoms. In the flow and sacred mystery of life, there was room for the immensity of joy and sorrow. He felt completely at peace. Now that he had regained his strength and inspired by these childhood memories, it is said that he then sat under the Bodhi tree for 49 days, which led to his enlightenment. After which he began to teach. In the book, Compassion and Emptiness in Early Buddhist Meditation, Analayo points out how Buddha's inquiry into the source of suffering and the means to alleviate it for all beings, as in the story of his response to the dying insects, shows his deep compassion. Analayo writes, quote, the form his compassion took from then onwards was teaching the Dharma. He continues, his compassionate impulse to teach others first manifests as a sense of gratitude. Though the practice advocated by his first two teachers and the asceticism upheld by his 5 former companions had not led him to awakening, they did form part of the path he had traversed. In recognition of his debt of gratitude to those who supported him in his search, his compassionate impulse to teach the path to liberation first turned to them. In other words, he taught them first. Now, his discovery of the 4 Noble Truths, which was the fruit of his awakening, was so radically different from the ascetic practices of his companions, He needed a novel way to present them, a way that would have the best chance to be received positively. So he comes up with a scheme that appears to take its inspiration from the process of medical diagnosis, which it appears was in existence at the time. That is, people would have been able to relate to the following process: disease identification, cause, the healthy state identification, and the cure. And several early discourses do compare the Four Noble Truths to medical diagnosis. So let's take a moment to look at the Four Noble Truths and their parallel with a chant that we do in our Sangha, the Four Practice Principles, that we chant on Sundays and also at Inquiry. So I will now share my screen. And hopefully, yeah, okay, good. Okay. Okay. How does that look? Can see it? Okay. So
Yep, it works.
thank you. Serenity, we're going to read across. So the medical model here on the left is what I just described. You go to the doctor, he or she identifies the disease, then he or she looks at the cause, what would be the healthy state, and what's the cure? How do I cure this problem? So we're going to go across because the middle column is Buddha's awakening, what he discovered. He was looking for the cause. What is this human condition, and how do I understand how to cure it, and what's the cause of it? So would you read across the first line, starting with disease identification, Serenity?
Sure. Disease identification, which, to my mind also means you have to fit the box
Mm-hmm.
of symptoms.
Exactly.
Dukkha, which is suffering. And then caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering.
So you can see how this first discovery is that suffering is inevitable. That's the first thing. And that our chant, the first line of our chant, which relates to this suffering, is that we are caught in the self-centered dream. And that's all we get is suffering. So it gets, our chant gets much more specific about the suffering. Barbara, would you like to read across from cause and go across? Oh, can you? Oh, wait, here you go. I have to ask you to unmute. Perfect.
Okay.
Go.
Okay. Cause becomes caused by craving, and the principle is that we hold on to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, doctor, you've told me that I have this problem called suffering. Well, why do I have it? The doctor says, you have it because you're craving. And the
Mm-hmm.
craving that this disease, the form that this craving takes is very specific. Why are you caught? Why are you caught in this dream? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
holding on.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're holding on,
Mm-hmm.
especially to thoughts, which is where a lot of it begins, right?
Right.
Thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Serenity, you want to take the healthy state identification?
Sure. Healthy state identification. Nirvana. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher.
Okay, so the doctor says, yes, what we're looking for, the absence of suffering, is reality, nirvana, reality. Each moment clear, we're seeing clearly the these aspects of the self-centered dream are clouding our vision, and we're after having the courage, the ability, the capacity to really see things as they are and to learn as we see, oh, I was not seeing that, but now I see it. Oh, that was my teacher. I learned because I saw that my vision was clouded by something or other. Barbara, do you want to take the last line
Mhm.
across?
The cure would be the Noble Eightfold Path, which is being just this moment, compassion's way.
Thank you. So he actually did give a guidebook, and that was the Noble Eightfold Path, and which we sum up very concisely as being just this moment, compassion's way. So because compassion will run through all of the aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path. And this idea of the medical model, that so Buddha really needed a way to convince these ascetics who he had trained with. They were his disciples in asceticism. Now he's switching on them. What would help them to relate to this new idea? And he used something very I think a really good way to make it relevant to them. And this model here is from this
Mhm.
book by Bhikkhu Analayo, Compassion and Emptiness in Early Buddhist Meditation. I think I mentioned it to you before. Okay. So what we're up to is the Buddha's enlightenment. And I just need to get back to my document here. So we're going to fast forward, and Buddha does gain many, many followers as he continues to teach his entire life. And next week, we'll start with his last year. And he did live to be in his 80s. And in his last year, he was very ill and faced with the task of naming a successor. So that really is as far as we're going to go tonight. And I'm wondering if there's anything in the class tonight that stands out for you or that you'd like to share.
I've been very moved by the class.
Thank you.
I it's just a wonderful feeling to know that I can shift my thinking, and I have been able to do that during the class. Um, be more compassionate to myself for my anxiety, um, letting those feelings go, being more compassionate about the traumas that I've been thinking about that um, are still present, and that's why I was thinking about them and feeling more compassionate to myself. And that's because of what you were saying, and because of what I was learning about Siddharth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Serenity, anything that you'd like to share?
No, not really. I don't have anything in particular in mind. I'm
Okay.
just always happy to see your face and see what, after the intensive this week, it's been um, just truly lovely. And I'm so glad you got to be a head student because I didn't know that that was something that remote folks could do.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of the way things are going with the hybrid model at Appamada. But yeah, it's been wonderful for me. It's winding up, and just thank you both for being with me tonight.
Thank you.
And we'll just bow out, three of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.